With 45 million players worldwide and up to 3 million playing at any given moment, Fortnite Battle Royale is currently one of the most popular video games in the world. Although you probably didn't have to have me telling you that, considering it's all over Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, the actual news, and if it's anything like mine at least, the recommended videos bar here on YouTube. For those who don't know what the hubbub is about, let's break it down real quick so that we're all on the same page. Fortnite is what's known as a Battle Royale game, hence, the name. The premise of these games is that some number of people enter but only one leaves victorious. It's you against the world. Well, unless you play doubles or you do squad-based play, in which case it's your group against the world, but the concept still remains. In Fortnite's case, there are 100 players per match, so if you're playing solo, you'll have to outlive the other 99. It's a pretty tall order, so unlike most other shooters, a victory is pretty difficult to come by, making them really satisfying to get when it's finally earned. Or, at least, I assume. So I'm actually a pretty big Fortnite fan because, the graphics, the dynamism that comes with all the building elements, and the price point of, $0 to play. Because, as a graduate student, that's realistically the only thing that fits within my budget.
Look at me, I'm a grad student. I'm 30 years old and I made $600 last year.
Bernard, don't make fun of grad students. They just made a terrible life choice.
No matter how much I play, the solo grind is just brutal. I find myself dying time after time after time. I can come really freaking close, but the victory royale eludes me. While I have one of the multiplayer game modes, I've never managed to pull out a solo victory, despite many, many attempts. So this got me thinking, how many other people share in my pain? How many others have never won a game of Fortnite? Now you may be thinking that this may be the sort of thing that seems Googleable, but it turns out that the answer isn't out there. If you Google the phrase number of people who have never won in Fortnite, you'll find numerous forum posts with people wondering why they can't score a win, so I'm definitely not alone. Unless they've since gone on to secure wins, but for the sake of this video and my self-esteem, I'm just going to assume that I'm not the only person left in the loser circle. Cool? Cool. But digging around online, you don't really find any statistics for the average player, like the average win rate and the number of people who have never won a game. Although I did manage to find a Fortnite API, it doesn't seem like you can just pull out all the stats for all of the users, so unless Epic Games decided to just release it all, it'd be pretty tough to get an accurate guess for those figures. So if the data aren't there, or aren't readily available, does this become a question that we can't answer? Well, yes and no. We probably won't be able to use the actual data to figure out the unassailable answer to the question, but we can get at least a pretty good initial estimate through the usage of computer simulation. Now you may hear the word simulation and think of things like astronomy, molecular biology, weather and climate research, and other STEM fields. And these fields definitely do a fair amount of this kind of research. But, and this is something that a lot of people may not necessarily know, so do many of the social sciences. Sociologists have used it to investigate geographic patterns of racial disparities. Political scientists use simulations to investigate how badly a state's districts are gerrymandered and to predict election results. And loads of research in evolutionary psychology use simulations to see what kind of behaviors are stable given a set of conditions and assumptions. Simulations work through the usage of variables and relationships. Researchers identify the kinds of variables that are going to matter to the question and then determine the rules that govern the relationships between them. These are by necessity going to be an overly simplistic look at how the phenomenon in question actually works, but provided that the variables and relationships are constructed with a deep knowledge gained from understanding other research, these simplified looks can give us a pretty good initial approximation. While you can just simulate one event based upon the relationships seen amongst these variables, many studies will take something through thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of simulations, randomly tweaking the variables each time to ensure that one's conclusions aren't the result of just a fluke outcome. You can see an awesome example of how simulations can help researchers understand natural and social phenomenon by checking out this collaboration between Up and Adam and Jabrillis. Link for that is going to be down in the doobly-doo, as well as a card somewhere around here. So since the data aren't readily available to answer our question, I decided to use computational simulation to at least get an initial guess at how many people have never won a solo game. Let's start with the assumptions governing the model. First, we're going to assume that the average Fortnite player has played 50 solo matches. Second, we're going to assume that everyone has an equal probability of winning the game when they enter. I created 10,000 hypothetical Fortnite players, had each play 50 games, and repeated this procedure 1,000 times. Using all of the simulated data, I came up with an estimate for the number of people who have never won a game, the average win rate per player, and the maximum number of wins seen in the dataset. Results: of the 10,000 players, an average of 6,051 never win, and those who do have an average win rate of 0.5, meaning there's only about 1 win per 2 people. The best performers in the dataset have a win rate of about 10%, scoring about 4.9 wins per 50 games. So under our two assumptions, our computational model suggests that over 60% of players will never get the W in solos. Now that may seem a bit high, and it's because it is. These assumptions aren't really that accurate when we think about them for a moment. we can do better. This is pretty common when you see research employing computational modeling or formal modeling in the social sciences. You'll start with the most basic of basic assumptions, knowing that they're wrong, and then tweak them in ways that better reflect reality. One obvious issue with the assumption that we were using earlier is that I was assuming that everyone is equally skilled at playing Fortnite, but that's definitely not the case. Some people are really good, while others are more like me and not as good. So let's assume that player skills follow a bell curve. We have a few really good players over here, and a few really bad players over here. Most people hover around this middle ground. Let's give the average person about a 5% chance of winning their games, with the best performers having a 20 to 25% chance of winning, and let's give the worst players a 1% chance, just as good as chance itself at winning their games. Making even this small adjustment radically changes the outcome of our estimates. Now the average win rate is about 4.3 wins over the 50 games, but a full 12% of players will never get a victory. The best performers are racking up an average of 20.5 wins, a win percentage of over 40%. But let's alter the rules one last time. This is definitely a bit more realistic than our first model, but it also assumes that people aren't learning or improving as they play. And that's definitely not true. People learn as they play. They get better from game to game. So let's just say that they'll improve by 2%. Not 2 percentage points, mind you, but 2% per game. So a 1% chance of victory would improve to a 1.02% chance, and not to a 3% chance. When you run the simulation, you'll get about 9% of players who have never gotten a win. The average player scored about 6.5 wins, and the best will have over 50% of their games won. There are a few things that I want us to take away from this. First off, that 9% is a small number. I'm clearly in the minority here. However, there are 45 million people playing Fortnite, and 9% of 45 million is just over 4 million. That means you can fill the US states of Wyoming, Vermont, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, and most of Delaware with just Fortnite's losers. So at least take solace in the fact that I'm in pretty good company. But aside from just that specific number, I hope that it shows the benefits and detriments of using computer simulations in social science research. On the one hand, given the right assumptions, simulations can provide a pretty solid initial look at research questions that might otherwise have data available. And making simulations force you to put all of your assumptions about what's going on out there on the table. But a simulation's strength is also its weakness, the assumptions. Even small changes in your initial conditions can lead to pretty drastic differences, especially as the system becomes more and more complex. Shoot, this was a really simple simulation, and it still had some drastic changes once we started making it more and more realistic, and there are other things that could change the results as well. What happens if you make a more complicated improvement function? What about if you have people play more or fewer games, or make the number of games not constant? What happens if you actually simulate games between simulated players, as opposed to using win probabilities like I did? While I'm fairly confident that that 9% figure is at least in the right ballpark, these changes might reflect reality better and allow us to hone in on a more accurate figure. And in that spirit, I wanted to share the R code that I used to make the simulation. There's a link to my GitHub down in the doobly-doo where I have the file available for anyone who wants to tinker with it. I look forward to seeing what you guys do. With all that said, what do you guys think? What are some questions in the social sciences that you think might, lend themselves well to having simulated data? Answer them. Are there certain disciplines that might be more apt to have simulations work on them? And what do you think about that 9% figure? Is it too high, too low, just about right? I'm curious to see what your answers are to those questions, any questions that kind of cropped up while watching this video, or suggestions for future topics. I'm always open to those down in the comment section below. Look forward to answering all of them and answering a few of them in the next comment response video. Sources for everything is always down in the doobly-doo, as well as links to Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by commenting down below, by sharing this video, and by subscribing to the channel and stay in the loop for more awesome social science content is uploaded. If you want to be guaranteed to be in the loop when I do upload a new video, be sure to click the bell icon as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.